So thank you so much for coming this morning. I will just introduce myself and say I feel like a little bit of an imposter at this conference, but I'm very happy to be here. I've had a very nice time so far. But yeah, about me, I am Stefanie. I'm based in London, and I work as a designer, artist, and author, mainly working on experimental data design projects. And recently, I've begun to describe this work by saying that I use data within my practice to create, connect, communicate, and educate. So firstly, I often use data to create a specific visual concept or aesthetic in an artwork or design, like my piece for the Memory Palace exhibition at the Victoria and Albert Museum in London, where alongside other designers, I illustrated a section of a story by the writer Hari Kunzru. And for this, I created a triptych of prints representing 3 world maps illustrating his story of a world pre, during, and post-apocalypse, where I created the aesthetic for this set of illustrations by gathering and visualizing data relevant to key themes of the story. Next, I use the collection and sharing of data as a way to bring people and communities together, and so I'll talk a lot about this. Like in this commission for the Royal Papworth Hospital in Cambridge in the UK, where I visualized anonymized heart and lung data gathered from patients and staff via researchers and data collection days. And did this in order to create a unique artwork for each of 192 inpatients' rooms that reference the natural pattern of waves, branching, and flows that are found both in the heart and lungs as well as in nature. Thanks. Next, I use data in the more traditional sense to communicate insight, but I do like doing this through exploring ways of presenting data that are friendly, playful, and expressive to a lay audience who might just be engaging with a data visualization for the first time. So that might mean making data danceable, like this project as the first data artist in residence at Facebook in California, where I converted a month of a couple's timelines, well, a couple's interactions across Facebook timelines into dance steps, bringing their digital dance across timelines into a physical space. Or it could also mean a project that's touchable and wearable, like this art commission created with Miriam Quick, where we presented weeks of large particle pollution data from Sheffield as a necklace that you could touch and wear. Or it could even mean making climate data and charts more accessible to a general audience in one slightly more conventional data project, where last year I was part of a team designing Greta Thunberg's climate book, where I created the text design of this 464-page book on climate change from Greta and 100 top experts, and then chart-directed charts designed by Sonia Kuipers, where the book also included Ed Hawkins, like the scientist, his really well-known climate stripes, data visualization on the cover. So it was definitely a collaborative effort and a very, very big book. Lastly, though, I use data as an educator. So I will teach data and data collection workshops to companies, children, and people of all walks of life using nothing more than simple drawing materials. So you might see with all of this work that my design approach is pretty analog. So I actually don't code that much. I will use ChatGPT to get what I need or collaborate with developers, but instead I often realize concepts by hand and work on a more lo-fi, more human-sized scale for most data projects. And that's a really brief intro about me and how I work, and half serious and half joking. I've begun to call this way of working post-infographic, where instead of just simply visualizing a data set in a straightforward way, as I did at the beginning of my career, so as an information graphic or traditional data visualization, now I'm instead working with data in more flexible ways. And, I do think this current way of working is the natural progression of our recent data visualization explosion that happened about a little over a decade or so ago, where information graphics and data visualizations, while of course always present in scientific and analytical fields, exploded across our collective cultural consciousness as a way to communicate messages to a lay audience. Where at the time, what you see on screen was the standard process. So if you have data, you turn it into an explanatory infographic or data visualization or whatever you want to call it. But now, in today's advanced data visualization space, data doesn't just have to be collected and visualized for statistical or actionable insights, or only turned into informative static or interactive data visualizations. But now data is an in-between material, in between many disciplines, and can be used for and function as many different things. And I will discuss some of these new spaces now using a few of my recent post-infographic projects as examples. So let's get started. So if not an infographic, or what can data become? So first, a data set and its visualization can function as a souvenir of an experience. And this can be shown in my collaboration with Georgia Lupi, a New York-based information designer. Now, we had met twice in person, and when we decided to collaborate, we discovered we had a lot in common, including an interest in working with data in this analog, lo-fi way. So we decided to challenge ourselves. Could we get to know each other better through data alone? But we lived on completely different continents, so how could we create an analog collaboration? So in the end, our greatest challenge, living long distance, became our biggest asset. And so together, we came up with a project that we called Dear Data, which was this year of sending each other hand-drawn data postcards back and forth across the Atlantic. Starting on the 1st of September and lasting a year, every week we collected our personal data around a shared topic like what you see on screen. And then when the data was collected at the end of the week, we'd spend time analyzing our data and then draw our visualizations on a postcard. And once, with the visualization on one side and then the legend, the address, and the stamp on the other. And then when we were finished, we would drop the postcard in our mailbox or postbox, wait with our fingers crossed, and if all went well, the postcard would arrive at the other person's address, and we would grab a coffee, sit down with a postcard, and read and learn more about the other person's life. Now, this is a really quick run through. But here, the whole project lasted a year, and so some of my postcards from the project are shown on screen. Now, during this year, we mainly explored themes requiring manual data collection, where we tried to move beyond the usual analytical, actionable, quantified self-data into something more akin to personal documentary, where we tried to use manual data collection to make sense of our world, to connect and be present in our day, and then also to create a souvenir of our lives to then send to the other person, where this manual process of data collection was as important as the end result. Where through this format, every week became an exploration of our lives through data, where even our choices in data collection, so what we chose to include and not to include, functioned as a unique representation of each person. And so over the year, the whole project became a fragmented self-portrait through data sent to the other. That's a very quick run through the project, but there's also a book on the project alongside a visual journal where people can try the process for themselves. Another nice thing about it is the original collection of postcards was acquired as part of the permanent collection of the Museum of Modern Art in New York, and it's finally on display in in their last gallery rehang if you happen to be visiting. And so that's a really great response to this project, but I think what's more exciting is that we found that this manual approach to data resonates with a wider audience. You know, we received emails from people starting Dear Data correspondence projects of their own, or are using it as part of formal curriculums from primary school to university and beyond to help students learn to collect and present data, where the project is even a starting exercise for a high school data science class, followed by over 150,000 students in the US. So, you know, this level of educational outreach is just incredible. And, you know, this really wonderful kind of positive response, I think it means that people now see data collection as a process that can be used to better understand themselves and their world, where today, instead of only documenting life with photos or writing journals, people are able to document with data or spreadsheets or tick marks. And now data and data gathering can be seen as part of our human experience. I really like this focus on data collection. And that focus in the Dear Data project has been a big influence for me, including for my later data-driven public art projects, where data sets become an interface for engaging with a community. And so I began to create what I call data collection experiences that offer participants space for self-reflection and community connection. And I started these explorations during an art residency that I had just before the pandemic at the National Maritime Museum in Greenwich, London, where I was specifically brought in to create artwork using visitor data. My studio was situated right in the middle of the galleries, and while I was there, I became fascinated by the collection of Royal Navy ships badges that were on the gallery walls around my studio door. And so these are really great. They're very witty and playful in their imagery, and the Royal Navy ships badges, they're like the visual identity of a ship, and it's very similar to a traditional coat of arms. And while observing museum visitors, I began to see them as a fleet of ships where each visitor ship brought their unique personality as their cargo into the museum. And so I decided that for my end artwork, they should be commemorated with their own ship's badge made from their personal data. So I needed to collect data to create the final artwork. And so I decided to do this by creating a meaningful data collection experience that would appeal to visitors of all ages and be thankful of their data contribution. My data collaborator, Miriam Quick, created surveys appropriate for both children and adults, and these collected a mixture of basic demographic data, as well as questions about their personalities, and also asked which single word they would use to describe themselves. So the two of us collected data in a very lo-fi way over 5 days through setting up a stall in the middle of the museum where we invited people to take our survey and then learn what ship they would be based on their personality. So the survey took a few minutes to fill out, and then when completed, we would use this very lo-fi decoding tool on the left to assess their survey responses, determine what ship they would be, and then we'd give them a giant literal ship's badge, a big sticker that I designed of that ship. Next, we gave participants further context through displaying an analog tally board showing how many of each ship type took the survey. So most people were more helpful ships at the bottom. I mean, I think they're just kind of lying. You know, everyone says that they're very good and helpful. Lifeboats, ferries, humanitarian ships, but not so many fighting, combative ships, which was disappointing to the children who wanted to be aircraft carriers, but unfortunately the data said they were really lifeboats or ferries. So like we generally wouldn't swap out stickers. But it was really great. It was mostly young people and children who engaged with us. But at the end of the data collection, it was great. We had 600 survey responses to work with. And what I like about this data collection experience is it offered multiple points for museum visitors to learn about themselves in the museum, where some people really enjoyed reflecting upon their answers to the survey, whereas others were most amused about the ship they would be, to those who were more interested in seeing how their results compared to others in the tally chart. So it just offered all these different ways in. Next I had to create the artwork. So when the data was analyzed, there wasn't really anything out of an ordinary with the data, but the most evocative and lovely part of the survey was the one word the visitors used to describe themselves. So we used this as the main mode of organizing our data. So now with this data in hand, I needed to create an artwork that spoke to the audience I collected data from, so children, parents, newcomers to data. So I decided to move away from traditional charts, abstracted data, as it really didn't feel right for this skewing younger, all ages audience. And instead, I moved towards a more playful approach. So, I made these first sketches where every word used by visitors to describe themselves is one badge, where demographic data would inform the external frame of the badge, and then the internal watery scene would be created from visitors' personality scores. And in this scene, the 5 facets of the personality test were visualized by the chosen animal and what they were holding, what they were sitting in, the weather and the sea behind them, where every element had a reason. And this is what the final badges look like, where Each represented the aggregated responses for each word used to describe themselves, where every single one of the 177 created badges is unique. And so I'll just keep flipping through to the final piece on the wall, where this finished work really functions as a document of this ephemeral 5-day data collection experience with visitors that happened previously. And I just really like how this work offered a space for through this data collection and visualization process, it offered a space for visitors of all ages to enjoy this artwork in different ways, functioning on multiple levels for multiple and mostly younger audiences. So, that was the start of this way of working with communities, this kind of influence led to a more recent commission, Updating Happiness. And so this was originally commissioned by the Wellcome Collection in London for an exhibition about happiness. So it is on display maybe for another week in Dresden at the German Hygiene Museum. But anyway, at the Wellcome, the curators invited me to create what they called an emotional check-in for visitors to help them think about their perception of happiness as they entered the exhibition. So, something using data. So how to do that? Well, I started to research the project, and I became interested in the happiness quotes that you can often find on Instagram. So they all have a very similar aesthetic, pink backgrounds, people reaching up to the sky, beaches, sunsets, and so on. But they do have a problem. They're often pretty superficial, and they don't truly show the diverse picture of what actually makes us happy. So I decided with my commission I would find a way of making a better version of these quotes. So how did I achieve this? Well, I created a work where to start. Participants are invited to take a 2-minute survey either online or on their phones in the gallery. And this survey asks you your age, along with 4 questions adapted from the UK's Office of National Statistics for measures of personal well-being, which are on screen. So participants can get a sense of the measures that the UK and other countries have found are best to measure well-being. So, like how satisfied are you with your life nowadays? To what extent do you feel the things you do in your life are worthwhile, or how happy or how anxious did you feel yesterday? Then alongside that, the user can choose one of 4 questions to answer about their perception of happiness. My favorite, what guilty pleasure secretly makes you happy but is too embarrassing to tell anyone about? So, the participant will press enter, and then their data is combined with the text of historical happiness quotes from different cultures and philosophers to create a new quote that they can add to a growing collective archive of reflections on happiness. And this is a guilty pleasure that someone did actually submit to the project on the screen, where it's a visualization, because every aspect of the design, from the shapes to the color to the font, is informed by their survey answers, and the bright colors are meant to be the opposite of those very pastel Instagram quotes. And in the gallery, you can actually decode the design. So there is a legend to decode what all of those, the typeface and the colors mean. But what I do like about the experience is that just by taking the survey, it gives participants a 2-minute pause and emotional check-in to reflect on their happiness, creating space for them to spend time closely looking at this part of themselves that they might not look at otherwise. And while the results of the self-reflection, well, at least from the Welcomes exhibition so far, was mostly the good stuff of life, as shown in the most frequent words on screen, I was still pleased to see that, quite a few transgressive guilty pleasures got a mention. So here are the ones that are okay to show in a talk. There's a very joyful, there's lots of wonderful, charming ones as well. But these individual moments of self-reflection were then displayed with thousands of other contributions online, or printed on wallpaper in the gallery, or displayed as live projection, or displayed on the gallery's external facade, where the walkthrough of this data collection experience is similar to the Maritime Museum. You know, they have this close self-reflection, they get this insight or surprise, a gift for their time, and then they're able to see themselves in context with, you know, the community around them, kind of giving them a chance to understand their place in the wider community and then better understand the nuance and diversity of what human happiness truly looks like. So, even more recently, like right now, this is basically the creative stuff I'm working on at the moment. I'm extending the idea of data collection as a way to connect communities in the projects I'm creating for the children and young people living on the bone marrow transplant ward at Great Ormond Street Children's Hospital in London. So, a bit about Great Ormond Street. It's opened in 1852. That's very old. I'm American. That seems very old. It's one of the top children's hospitals in the world. One fun fact, though, is they own the rights to the classic children's story, Peter Pan. The author, J.M. Barrie, gifted it to them so they could raise regular funds for the hospital. And in the UK, there's a legal exception that's been made for it so they can hold the copyright in perpetuity. It never expires, which I think is like really lovely. But as you know, back to the bone marrow transplant ward. So for them, I've been holding consultation workshops and designing artwork that will be in the bedrooms of the ward when it moves to a new building. And I'm also creating art interventions like the one I'll show you. Working, though, with the children and young people on this ward has been a real challenge. It's different to anything I've done, and that's because of the strict infection protocols. So a bone marrow transplant procedure, I mean, some of you may know people or, you know, had experience that it drastically reduces the body's ability to fight off infection. So children and young people are nursed in strict isolation in purpose-built isolation bedrooms to prevent infection for many weeks or even months, where, you know, people have to wear masks and aprons when they go in, and visitors and materials entering the room are extremely restricted. So even art materials are restricted. You know, it all needs to be clean and individually wrapped and sealed in bags. So it's quite an intense environment. So, you know, how to create an art intervention that sparks conversation within such an isolated space? Well, when trying to find a solution, I was looking back to my affinity for the very retro, vintage data collection hobbies found, I guess, in the UK and elsewhere, like train spotting or plane spotting, where you see something, observe it, and then you tick it off a list. And because of this, I've become, like, I really love the vintage I Spy series from the UK. It started in the 1950s, so it's around today as well. But it would, back in the day, it would help children spot and log all sorts of things like stamps in churches or antique furniture or car numbers. I don't think those are around anymore. But now you can get one that says, like, you can tick off all of the different London sightseeing that you discover as a child. But the way that it works is, for example, if you were collecting spots of everyday machines and spotted a tape recorder, which would be very difficult to do in 2023, you would receive 30 points. And then when you collected a certain amount of points, you'd win a badge or certificate. So this, I don't know, I always love stuff like spotting things. So I was influenced by this, but alongside my brief to create connections and community, my project also needed to somehow bring nature into a ward that was sealed off from the outside world. So, you know, merging these two influences together, I thought that perhaps the children and young people on the ward could go on a nature spotting expedition from their hospital beds, where instead of spotting birds or wild animals, they would be spotting the animals wandering the wards, so the staff. So instead of the children and young people being constantly monitored by staff, this project turns the tables. To do this, though, I created a staff spotting safari booklet. So this adheres to the strict infection protocol, and it's sealed, it can go in. And using this booklet, participants embark on a challenge spotting different types of staff working in the ward, where they might have to spot a staff member with tattoos or start conversations with staff popping in and out of their room to see if they've ever been scuba diving. You know, find a staff member with brightly dyed hair, or find a left-handed staff member through more conversations with them. And so for this booklet, which actually, I should say it needs to work from like age 3 to age 15. So I've tried to find ways of accommodating everyone in this challenge. So that's why this lots of fun things for the younger ones. I created a different character for each staff species where there's this small nod to data visualization where I visualize each category of staff attribute, like whether it's the color of uniform they wear or hobbies they have or the sport they take part in. And I made the characters' heads different shapes to highlight how these are different staff subspecies. And once a certain type of staff is spotted, participants color them in and or tick them off a list, winning a prize once they've spotted a certain amount. So for this, it is all about observation and data collection. And a data visualization is only loosely created in the form of ticking a box, like say a teenager that's not interested in coloring it in, or coloring in a character for the 5-year-old. So this has only been created, so it'll soon be introduced on the wards. So I'm looking forward to seeing how this experiment, will unfold and hoping it will inject some playfulness and create connection into like what is a very challenging hospital experience. Rolling through my different things that data does, like the things that you can do with data besides infographics or dataviz, more in a traditional sense. I would say like in today's advanced dataviz space, a data set is also now something artists can respond to. And I really see it as much a part of our modern world as all of the other subjects that artists have traditionally responded to over the centuries. So recently, I undertook an art residency with People Like You, a UK-based research group looking at data personalization, where, if you don't know, where through the use of data, a company tailors their services to you according to what people like you tend to choose. And this was an art is inquiry residency where the research derived through my art practice complemented the more traditional academic research on the project. So it was a really interesting residency, and my focus was on personalized medicine where data can be used to precisely tailor medical treatment. And these personalized treatments are often built upon research using data from biobanks that collect, process, and store like biological samples and data for future research use. So I became curious. My research question was, trying to understand how the biobank stakeholders perceive the literal people behind the numbers, the donors who give their data and samples to this research. Do they see them as people, or are they samples in cold storage, or just numbers in a spreadsheet? So using my art practice, I began to research these questions through looking closely at an Imperial College-based cohort study in biobank focused on members of the UK police force. And I first mapped the flow of data from donating participant to final researcher, and then interviewed researchers, lab techs, and more to understand how they see these donors. And with this research, I now needed to create an artwork for my findings. And normally I would do this through visualizing a data set. But I had a problem with this. This one, I didn't actually have one. I couldn't access the actual study data because it's obviously very secure. But it was also hard to access precise information about what data was collected by the study because some was only collected for a short amount of time or a limited number of participants. So the data within the study was messy, so I thought, okay, I need to try a different approach. So instead of starting with hard data, I began drawing small sketches representing the various processes within the biobank system to better understand all of its working parts. Then from these sketches, I built a universal visual language where common processes were represented using the same graphic elements. And around this time, I became interested in Marcel Duchamp's artwork, The Large Glass. So this isn't just an artwork, but it's also an artistic diagram of a process Duchamp was trying to visualize, where every visual element has a reason, and the artwork can be fully annotated to explain this process. So I became interested in creating similar artistic diagrams during my residency to faithfully present the data and information I discovered, but also accepted that my end result would need to accommodate some imprecision. So using this visual language I created, I made this very large drawing showing the whole biobank system where the journey the data takes is accurate, but the total number of data points moving through the system is mainly illustrative. starting with the collection of data and samples from a participant within a clinic, then to the moving to the processing and preparing of these samples, to their storage in databases and long-term cold storage, and then finally to the researchers accessing these data and samples for use in their research projects. Next, I created another series of 8 artistic diagrams illustrating insights derived from the interviews with all the different biobank stakeholders, basically everyone who worked there or was involved, as shown above. And these used the same visual language of the system map to communicate the main takeaways from these interviews. Where these works function like Duchamp's large glass, where when annotated as on the right, they provide this detailed glimpse for those interested in understanding this process, representing my research visually as opposed to the standard form of an academic paper. So, if you want to learn more, there is a website where you can see all the artworks annotated in detail to understand all the insights from this research. And it's been really interesting seeing how researchers responded to these often qualitative diagrams, where even if they're not precise renditions of hard data, they begin to spark conversations. Like, for example, due to seeing that project, I was invited to collaborate with Genomic England's Diverse Data Initiative, an initiative that aims to reduce health inequalities and improve patient outcomes within genomic medicine. And so for them, I created drawings visualizing how data gaps and bias arise in a data set. Like this drawing showing how bias can arise when data is unable to be disaggregated or separated into its smaller components, or one that shows how bias can occur at the very start of a study due to the questions that a study chooses to ask, where some questions might spotlight and serve the majority population but offer less impact for a minority group. Or finally, a drawing illustrating how bias can arise from data architectures and storage that aren't designed in a way to, that accommodates the data collection needs of a specific population. So like a lot of data is lost in that process. So, like moving from data visualization to this, where I've been using drawings to visualize like parts of the data analysis process, has been an interesting shift in my work, but it's been an interesting conversation with all of them. Okay, so I've got a couple more projects, and this is just where I'm rounding everything up, where it's less about thinking what else we can use data for besides infographics, but instead explores what can replace them in the role of communicating data. And this is a problem that I explored in the latest book that I have out with my friend Miriam. I Am a Book, I'm a Portal to the Universe, and this is published by Penguin in the UK. This book was a response to the traditional infographic book, which was an innovative format a decade ago, but it has transformed the data design landscape, but it really hasn't changed much since. So we asked ourselves, how can we make something different than the standard info book, and what does that mean in practice? With all of this in mind, we began to brainstorm new ideas for collaboration while dancing my baby to sleep in a cafe, and we came up with our superbook idea. What if we made a book where the book itself is the measuring device? So we began to develop this concept. First, the book is a measuring device that can be used to measure things. We wanted to make a book for almost everyone, from children age 8 and up to adults. So I love an all ages audience. And our goal was to write for the data uninitiated or data intimidated, so people who wouldn't normally pick up a book with data or science in the title. And finally, our golden rule and biggest constraint. All of the data should be represented on a 1-to-1 scale, printed on the page at actual size. Where by doing this, we hope that the reader's lived experience and interaction with the data would make that data more memorable and rooted in their world. So how did we do this? We made a data book with no charts, no infographics, where instead this book only communicates its data using its bookie superpowers. So it's ink, typeface, page size, thickness, volume, weight, and more. So you might have, we might use the double O's within relevant words to represent to scale the actual size of various animals' eyes in a spread, or use the volume of the book to talk about how if our book was water, it would keep a mouse alive for 3 months. Also, a key part of the design is that physical interaction with the book was integral to understanding data concepts, and these interactions also became variables to encode with data. So you might have to drop the book from waist height to understand how fast it moves through the air, slam it shut as hard as you can to hear how noisy sunshine would actually sound if space wasn't a vacuum, or find out exactly how many stars are born and exploded during the time it takes to turn a page. So it's a very physical book. We challenge ourselves to make a data book without using the word data anywhere, except for our bios where it couldn't be helped. Kids aren't reading that though. But anyway, after all of our hard work, did we succeed in making a book that went beyond the usual info book? Well, we won the Royal Society's Young People's Book Prize 2021. It's a prize that supports the writing of excellent, accessible STEM books for under 14s. And the UK Royal Society is the longest running scientific institution in the world. Isaac Newton was once its president, so this means a lot to us. Best of all, while the shortlist was named by a panel of adult experts, the final decision was based on the voting of 11,500 young people, and their decision to vote us the winner is really testament to the fact that these new approaches that we were exploring work, and that people respond to these embodied ways of presenting data. It's quite an interesting path to work down, and so I have one project. This is currently on display, but I think the exhibition is going to end. I extended this idea further in a recent small art commission called 500 Cubic Meters of Sea. This was created for the University of Plymouth and displayed alongside work by 2 other artists. So a little bit about Plymouth, though. It's a port city on the southwest coast of England. It's a historic maritime city with a very rich seafaring, Royal Navy heritage. It's also a big center of marine research. And this show, Ocean, was about, of course, the ocean, particularly in and around Plymouth Sound, which is the main body of sea or water the city's situated on. In my initial meetings with the exhibition curators, I was invited to create a really friendly, accessible work that would showcase the wonders of the ocean to a Plymouth audience who might not know much about the sea just outside their doors. Just because you live by it doesn't mean you engage with it. And so this project started with a really great boat trip on the Plymouth Marine Institute's research boat. And, I did this with the other artists all around the Sound to find inspiration for our various commissions. And when I was on the boat trip, I was inspired by, I guess, just the immensity of the sea. I actually grew up in Colorado, so sea is still hard to wrap my head around. So I was wondering if there would be a way through data to bring the sea and display it in the gallery, giving gallery goers a chance to walk through and be surrounded by it in some capacity. So extending, I guess, the ideas from my and Miriam's book, I began to think about how the volume of the gallery space could be used to represent a volume of seawater, and figured out that 500 cubic meters of water could fit in the gallery, in the part of the gallery my work would be displayed in, where this would be demarcated by a thick blue line on the wall, and then could loop around the far wall and the windows to define this volume. And so here again, I'm trying to create this one-to-one informative experience, but scaling up, using a whole room to create something that's more immersive. And once I knew that I was working with seawater, we just had to figure out what part of Plymouth Sound. And so while in conversation with Sir Richard Thompson, the head of the Marine Institute, he recommended Plymouth Breakwater, which was constructed in 1812, and this is a very historic stone breakwater. It protects the Sound and ships and boats. The ships and boats anchored within from tides and waves and storm surges. And so we thought that this would be a good place because I could use the floor of the gallery to represent the seabed, and then also use the wall of the gallery to show what creatures live on the rock face. And so that's kind of what I calculated. I've got this painted wall that represents the rock face of the Sound and how many creatures would be found within that space. And then we calculated how many creatures would be found in that much seabed by the breakwater, and then the open sea as well. So then I had to find data. Reached out to Marine Institute scientists and research divers to gather whatever data was available. Spoiler alert, it's really hard to get scientists to do anything outside of their own research, but thank goodness, I'm very grateful to the ones that did help me, and I had enough to actually make an artwork from. So I began to create the work, which was typographic and very playful for a more general audience, and just designed in a way to illustrate, like, through type, the characters of the creatures I was writing. Writing about with a bit of descriptive terms, and there were actually photos of these creatures in the learning space in the exhibition. So, I described creatures swimming in the water, like including the number of billions of viruses, bacteria, and phytoplankton in that space by the breakwater, to the animals that live on the stone face of the breakwater. And we painted the wall to show the proportion that would be covered by sea sponges or red algae. And then finally outlining what animals would be creeping along the seabed. And so the floor was outlined with red tape to highlight this. And so this is what it looked like in the gallery. And I suppose I should stand on that like 3 seconds longer. And you can see this blue line showing the volume of that 500 cubic meters wound around the gallery, around the learning space, and then around a sculpture by Bridget Ashton, and then around the door back to the main wall. And what I really like about this is that instead of presenting a chart to represent this information, it plays with the power of one's imagination, where while walking around the space, you're imagining walking on a seabed and thinking about that number of inhabitants swirling around you. And I think, this was made with paint, vinyl lettering, vinyl tape. I think it really shows, small budget comparatively, that interactivity and experiences don't always have to be digitally mediated or have a lot of money thrown at them to be effective. So just to wrap it all up, because I think, at the end, just my findings in working in this post-infographic space. Firstly, data collection and visualization has become this form of personal documentary for many people, where in many ways the process is more important than the end result. I'm also starting to see that less accurate, more flexible presentations of data still have value to an audience, where working in this blurry space might be the right approach to representing data-driven concepts that are in their own way blurred and messy. And I'm also finding success in using data collection as an interface for engaging and responding to a wider community, where it functions as an icebreaker to start deeper conversations. And lastly, I believe in the value of more embodied experiential approaches to representing data for a wider audience, where a reader can experience data directly in front of, or like a participant around them in the gallery or on their scale. And I think further exploration of this approach is really an interesting way in moving the data design space forward. So that's my talk. But if I have time, I can give you a few quick tips on becoming more post-infographic. Do we have time? Do you want? Yeah, should we do it? All right, okay. And post-infographic tips. Okay, firstly, if you're bored, try something new. So if you're endlessly repeating yourself with how you represent data, try something different, however small, boredom can be a great motivator. I've discovered that. Also, look outside the field of dataviz for inspiration. Mix genres and influences when presenting data. I think multidisciplinary projects are what move the field forward. Also, just be reminded that anything can represent data, like virtually anything in the world. Stones, plants, pasta, pianos, skipping, singing. It can all become a variable that communicates data. So you're not even just limited by graphic elements on a page or screen. Like, we could visualize data with whatever's in this room. Also, don't be intimidated by chart rules. Just think about reasons. Just consider the context and how you're working with data. Have a good reason for all your decisions and experiment. An open, flexible approach to making data viz is more intuitive and enjoyable than one that's heavily rule-based. And lastly, I know that a data necklace is not at all it's not suitable for every use case. So I think any small change you make or step you take forward to pushing yourself in how you present data or making it more tailored to the data you're working with counts as a success. And so, yeah, that's enough to move it forward. So that's it. Thank you very much. Yes. Yeah, I know. I didn't. they're very heavy. The I Am a Book. You can find it on Amazon alongside other places, I'm sure. You choose. The journal is available everywhere. Dear Data is only available as an import from America because the UK decided to stop publishing it. But it's fine. It's still available like via the US, so you can still get it here. Yeah. Yeah. Hi. Oh, you mean like specifically for the Children's Hospital? Well, yeah. I suppose, I guess my experience with these projects, like for the Welcome Collection, that was an exhibition, so curators invited me that I've worked with before. But in the National Maritime Museum, it started they were collecting more data from visitors, and so a curator really wanted somebody to turn that, to reflect to visitors to be like, we've been collecting data on you, here's what we've discovered. But their data wasn't good enough, it wasn't interesting enough, which is why I had to collect my own data for that. So I think they see it as a way of transmitting insights that they are collecting back to the people they're collecting it from for the National Maritime Museum. But for Great Ormond Street, they have it's just, I think they have Gosh Arts, which is like, they have a whole arts program. So they have all sorts of things coming into the hospital. They have like radio shows and zines and people creating artwork across the ward and dancers. And I think like it's such, the hospital is really for children that will travel from all over the UK. Like it's for people that really, really need something specific. So there's a lot of support, I think, to make it as enjoyable as possible for them, given the situation. Yes, it's great. It's probably my best clients so far, Hi.
Great talk.
Thank you.
So good. And I'm trying to think how I can apply a lot of the things you were talking about into my everyday work as well. And I think my key takeaway, and I want you to maybe ask a follow-up question on that, is how to make this community aspect, how to make data more engaging. And I love your thought about giving back. You mentioned, what did you say?
A gift or, yeah.
I think that's so good. Making data fun, even in a corporate environment, is going to help so much in engaging and feeling like, should I even invest the time to provide data or whatever? I think that
I do think it needs to be like, I guess the nefarious side of it is like, that's what social media is doing, right? They're giving you this fun experience and they're taking all your data. But I think you have to thank somebody for their time and make that. I think there's a lot to be said about the survey experience and making that meaningful for the person taking part, and they're not only being harvested, So like, I think what is really nice about like the happiness questions or the National Maritime Museum personality questions is people would come up and say, that was really good. Like it made me think about things I haven't really thought about before. And so it was like useful to them as well. And I think that's really nice. There's got to be ways of making it useful for both parties that I think makes it quite, more valuable for everyone. Yeah. Hi.
Super inspiring. I'm just on the same track as you here. As a continuation of that question, because it's very easy. The easy cop out of trying to give something back is just to reflect what data have I collected about you, and here's the data.
Mm-hmm.
I know what you did, but it's when it's, for example, social media, it's very easy to make it come across as quite scary.
Mm-hmm.
Like, oh, you clicked on 5 ads how will this be taken by the user?
Yeah, I think maybe I'm just trying to achieve lightheartedness and playfulness. I mean, like, I'm trying to think, I'm very aware that like where I do this, it's like not totally commercial, but more like public engagement, like for museums and stuff. But I think that I try to use humor and friendliness. It's kind of like, I don't know if anyone reads like I do have a Guardian, like I pay for the month, UK, I guess they're opening in Europe, the Guardian newspaper. So I do pay for the app, but then sometimes if I'm not logged in, at the bottom it says, you've read 200 like free articles this year, which is like, I mean, it's very clever, but they have a different tone, right? It's a bit more shaming. So like they want you to like donate to them. So, but like, you certainly feel the difference in how people communicate that data to you. Yeah. Playfulness, humor. I think with everything that I do, I'm trying to show people that data doesn't have to be, I mean, it is scary and intimidating for some cases, but like it is something that we're all kind of collecting, whether we track our runs or our food or the countries we visited. Like we have this, like it's part of our human experience, and it shouldn't be something that's scary.
You certainly have a talent for dismantling kind of the data, the high walls of the data, how scary it can be.
Yeah. I mean, there's like plenty of other artists like dressed in black that will, they make scary data art. So I'm in the friendly data side of things. Yeah, but anyway, are we good? Any questions? Any? I'm afraid of going over time. So I guess that's good.
The next session is anyways just an open one.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, thank you.